Hello. All right. So before we begin chapter 7, I just wanted to go into a slight bit of detail that I guess isn't super important. I thought I was recording with my earbuds, but I was actually recording with the default laptop microphone the entire time. Turns out that it's friendlier on the ears if I use that microphone, so the earbuds I didn't bother using. Um, Another microphone that I do have, I don't have a cord for. It's probably far better than all of this, but I'm just gonna have to go with this. And I don't know, there's, I guess, a bit of a 2010s kind of vibe that this audio gives off that I don't know. For some reason, I like it and hate it at the same time. And for some reason, I'm looking at me instead of actually looking into the actual camera because of course I don't know why. Anyway, so I know that's not a very important detail for anybody just wanting to do the read along, but I figured, you know, I don't know. I just want to talk about it for 2 seconds. So, all right, yeah. Anyway, today is a new day, and you'll also notice that once again there is in fact a corgi over here with a fez on his head, a corgi plush, not a literal real life corgi. Because, as we all know, fezzes are cool. And I decided for this also to just, why not? I put my replica sonic screwdriver here as well. So, with that, we are now going to continue reading Fangirl, starting with chapter 7. I may periodically take sips of coffee here. Even though it is still about, and it is now officially in the afternoon, between 12 and 1 p.m. I am not going to get more specific than that for, I don't know, superstitious reasons beyond my explanatory brain can process at the moment, or that you would be interested in hearing. Anyway, I have delayed this reading long enough. Let's delve into chapter 7, shall we? All right. And even though I know the audio works, I'm going to sit a little bit closer to the microphone just to make sure, because I'm extra superstitious now because I'm not having my earbuds in and it's making me a little nervous. Okay, so 7. When Kath saw Abel's name pop up in her phone, she thought at first it was a text, even though the phone was obviously ringing. Abel never called her. They emailed, they texted, just last night, but they never actually talked unless it was in person. Hello, she answered. She was waiting in her spot outside Andrews Hall of the English building. It was really too cold to be standing outside, but sometimes Nick would show up there before class and they'd look over each other's assignments or talk about the story they were writing together. It was turning into another love story. Nick was the one turning it that way. Kath, Abel's voice was gravely and familiar. Hey, she said, feeling warm suddenly, surprisingly. Maybe she had missed Abel. She was still avoiding Ren. Kath hadn't even eaten lunch at Selleck's since Ren drunked at her. Maybe Kath just missed home. How are you? Fine, he said. I I just told you last night I was fine. Yeah, yeah, I know, but it's different on the phone. He sounded startled. That's exactly what Katie said. Who's Katie? Katie's the reason I'm calling you. She's like every reason I'm calling you. Kath cocked her head. What? Kath, I've met someone, he said, just like that. Like he was in some telenovela. Katie? Yeah. And she made me realize that, well, that what you and I have isn't real. What do you mean? I mean our relationship, Kath, it isn't real. Why do you keep why do you keep saying her name like that? Of course it's real, Abel. We've been together for 3 years. Well, sort of. Not sort of, Cass said. Well, at any rate, his voice sounded firm. I met somebody else. Kath turned to face the building and rested the top of her head against the bricks. Katie. And it's more real, he said. We're just right together, you know? We can talk about everything. She's a coder too, and she got a 34 on the ACT. Kath got a 32. You're breaking up with me because I'm not smart enough? This isn't a breakup. It's not like we're really together. Is that what you told Katie? I told her we drifted apart. Yes, Kath spat out, because the only time you ever call is to break up with me. She kicked the bricks, then instantly regretted it. Right, like you call me all the time. I would if you wanted me to, she said. Would you? Kath kicked the wall again. Maybe. Abel sighed. He sounded more exasperated than anything. Anything else? Uh, More than sad or sorry, uh, we ha- uh, we haven't really been together since junior year. Kath wanted to argue with him, but she couldn't think of anything convincing. But you took me to the military ball, she thought. But you taught me how to drive. But your grandma always makes uh, tres leche cakes for my birthday. She makes it anyway for the bakery. Fine, Kath turned and leaned back against the wall. She wished she could cry. Just so that he'd have to deal with it. So noted. Everything is noted. We're not broken up, but we're over. We're not over, Abel said. We can still be friends. I still read your fic. Katie reads it too. I mean, she always has. Isn't that a coincidence? Kath shook her head, speechless. Then Nick rounded the corner of the building, acknowledged her the way he always did, looking her in the eye, and quickly jerked his head. Kath lifted her chin in answer. Yeah, she said into the phone. Coincidence. Nick had set his backpack on a stone planter, and he was digging through his books and notebooks. His jacket was unbuttoned, and when he leaned over like that, she could kind of see down his shirt, sort of. A few inches of pale skin and sparse black hair. I've got to go, she said. Oh, Abel said. Okay, do you still want to hang out over Thanksgiving? I've got to go, she said, and pressed end. Kath took a slow breath. She felt lightheaded and strained, like something too big was hatching inside her ribs. She pushed her shoulders back into the bricks and looked down at top of Nick's head. He looked up at her, smiled crookedly, holding out a few sheets of paper. Will you read this? I think maybe it sucks, or maybe it's awesome. It's probably awesome. Tell me it's awesome, okay? Unless it sucks. Kath texted Ren just before fiction writing started, hiding her phone behind Nick's broad shoulders. Abel broke up with me. Oh God, sorry, you want me to come over? Yeah, at 5? Yeah, you okay? Think so. End tables end. Have you cried yet? They were sitting on Kath's bed, eating the last of the protein bars. No, Kath said, I don't think I'm going to. Ren bit her lip, literally. Say it, Kath said. I don't feel like I have to. I never thought that not saying it would be this satisfying. Say it. He wasn't a real boyfriend. You never really liked him like that. Ren pushed Kath so hard she fell over. Kath laughed and sat back up, drawing her legs up into her arms. I really thought I did, though. How could you think that? Ren was laughing too. Kath shrugged. It was Thursday night, and Ren was already dressed to go out. She was wearing pale green eyeshadow that made her eyes look more green than blue, and her lips were shiny red. Her short hair was parted on one side and swept glamorously across her forehead. Seriously, Ren said, you know, you know what love feels like. I've read you describe it 1,000 different ways. Kath pulled a face. That's different. That's fantasy. That's... Simon reached out for Baz, and his name felt like a magic word on his lips. It's not all fantasy, Ren said. Kath thought of Levi's eyes when Reagan teased him. She thought of Nick tapping on his short, even teeth with the tip of his tongue. I can't believe Abel. I can't believe Abel told me this girl's ACT score, she said. What am I supposed to do with that? Offer her a scholarship? Are you sad at all? Ren reached out under her bed, or under the bed, and shook an empty protein bar box. Yeah, I'm embarrassed that I held on for so long, that I really thought we could go on like we were, and that because it feels like now high school is finally over, or and I'm sad because like now high school is finally over. Like Abel was this piece of really happy time that I thought I could take with me. Do you remember when he bought you a laptop power cord for your birthday? That was a cool gift, Cass said, pointing at her sister. Ren grabbed her finger and pulled it down. Do you think of him every time you booted it up? I needed a new power cord. Cass leaned back against the wall, facing Ren. He kissed me that day, on our 17th birthday for the first time. Or maybe I kissed him. Was it charged with passion? Kath giggled. No, but I remember thinking that he made me feel safe. She rubbed her head back against the painted cinder blocks. I remember thinking that me and Abel would never be like Dad and Mom, that if Abel ever got tired of me, I'd survive it. Ren was still holding onto Cass's hand. She squeezed it. Then she later then she laid her head against the wall, mirroring Kath. Kath was crying now. Well, you did, Ren said. Survive it. Kath laughed and pushed her fingers behind her glasses to wipe her eyes. Ren took hold of her hand. You know my stand on this, she said. Fire and rain, Kath whispered. She felt Ren's fingers circle her wrists. We're unbreakable. Kath looked at Ren's smooth brown hair in glint of steel, the crown of gray that circled the green in her eyes. You are, she thought. Does this mean no more Tres Leche cakes on her birthday? Ren asked. There's something else I wanted to tell you, Cass said before she could think it through. I mean, I I think there's this guy. Ren raised her eyebrows before Kath could say anything more. They heard voices and a key in the door. Ren let go of Kath's wrists and the door swung open. Reagan barreled in and dropped her duffel bag on the floor. She rushed out before Levi made it into the room. Hey, Kath, she said, already smiling. Are you? He looked at the bed and stopped. Levi, Kath said. This is my sister, Ren. Ren held out her hand. Levi's eyes were as wide as Cass had ever seen them. He grinned at Ren and took her hand, shaking it. Ren, he said, such fascinating names in your family. Our mom didn't know she was having twins, Ren said, and she didn't feel like coming up with another name. Cather Wren. Levi looked just how he now discovered sliced bread. Catherine. Kath rolled her eyes. Wren just smiled. Clever, right? Kath, Levi said, and tried to sit next to Wren on the bed, even though there wasn't enough room. Wren laughed and scooted towards Kath. Kath scooted too, reluctantly. If you give Levi an inch. I didn't know you had a mother, he said, or a sister. What else are you hiding? 5 cousins, Wren said, and a string of ill-fated hamsters all named Simon. Levi opened his smile completely. Oh, put it that way, Kath said with distaste. I don't want you to get charm all over my sister. What if we can't get it out? Reagan walked back to the open door and glanced over at Kath. She noticed Wren and shuddered. Is this your twin? You knew about the twin. Or you knew about the twin? Levi asked. Reagan, Kath said. Hello, Reagan said, frowning. Don't take any of this personally, Kath said to Ren. They're both like this with everyone. I have to go anyway. Ren slid cheerfully off the bed. She was wearing a pink dress and brown tights and brown ankle boots with heels and little green buttons uh, uh, up the side. They were Kath's boots, but Kath never brave enough to wear them. Nice to meet you, everybody, Wren said, smiling at Regan and Levi. See you at lunch tomorrow, she said to Kath. Regan ignored her. Levi waved. As soon as the door closed, Levi popped his eyes again, bluely. That's your twin sister? Identical, Regan said, like she had a mouthful of hair. Kath nodded and sat down at her desk. Wow. Levi scooted down the bed, so he was sitting across from her. I'm not sure what you're getting at, Kath said, but I think it's offensive. How can the fact that your identical twin sister is super hot be offensive to you? Because, Kath said, still too encouraged by Wren, weirdly by Abel, and maybe even by Nick to let this get to her right now. It makes me feel like the ugly one. You're not the ugly one, Levi grinned. You're just the Clark Kent. Kath started checking her email. Hey, Kath, Levi said, kicking her. Hey, Kath, Levi said, kicking her chair. She could hear the teasing in his voice. Will you warn me when you take off your glasses? Agatha Well-Beloved was the loveliest witch at Watford. Everyone knew it. Every boy, every girl, all the teachers, the bats in the belfry, the snakes in the cellars. Agatha herself knew it, which you might think would detract from her charm and her beauty, but Agatha, at 14, never used this knowledge to harm or hold over others. She knew she was lovely, and she shared it like a gift. Every smile from Agatha was like waking up to a perfect sunny day. Agatha knew it, and she smiled at everyone who crossed her path as if it were the most generous thing she could offer. From Chapter 15, Simon Snow and the Salkies 4. Copyright 2007, Jenna T. Leslie. All right. I'm going to try doing something a little bit new. I'm going to try pausing the recording because I need to let out a pretty furious cough, and I don't want that to make it into the recording. Okay. Admittedly, that was the first time I'd ever used the pause function on the recording thing, so I was a little bit nervous, just because. So anyway, I cleared my throat. It basically feels like there's a frog in my throat as I'm reading, so it is preventing me from really being able to enjoy the reading experience. Not that I'm not enjoying it. I just, when talking is the key part, and there's something preventing you from really immersing yourself into that aspect of it. Yeah, I may have to take more periodic pauses basically to clear my throat, and obviously I don't want anyone to be subject to that. So, yeah. Anyway, now we are going to move on to chapter 8. And once again, for some reason, I keep looking over here instead of looking into the camera because I'm just a big dumb idiot. Anyway, well, hoping I don't have to clear my throat again. All right. 8. Have you started your scene yet? They were in the sub basement of the library, the sub basement, and it was even colder than usual. The wind was making Nick's bangs flutter over his forehead. Do guys call them bangs? Kath wondered. Why is it windy in here? She asked. Why is it windy anywhere? Nick answered. That made her laugh. I don't know. Tides? Caves breathing? It's not wind at all, Kath said. It's what we feel when time suddenly jolts forward. Nick smiled at her. His lips were thin but dark and the same color as the inside of his mouth. English majors are useless, he said, twitching his eyebrows. Then he elbowed her. So, have you started your scene? You're probably done already. You're so fucking fast. I get lots of practice, she said. Writing practice? Yeah. For a second, she thought about telling him the truth. About Simon and Baz. About a chapter a day and 35,000 hits. I write laps, she said, every morning, just to stay loose. Have you started your scene? Yeah, Nick said. He was drawing swirls in the margin of the notebook. 3 times. I'm just not sure about this assignment. Professor Piper wanted them to write a scene with an untrustworthy narrator. Kath had written hers from Baz's point of view. It was an idea she'd had for a while. She might turn it into a longer fix someday. Someday when she was done with Carry On. This should be cake for you, Kath said, elbowing Nick back more gently. All your narrators are unreliable. Nick had let her Nick had let Nick had let her read some of his short stories in first few chapters of the novel he'd started freshman year. All his stuff was dark, dirtier, and grimier than anything Kath would ever write, but still funny and bracing, somehow. Nick was good. She liked to sit next to him and watch all that good come out of his hand. Watch the jokes spill out in real time. Watch the words click together. Exactly, he said, licking his top lip. He practically didn't have a top lip, just a smear of red. That's why I feel like I need to do something special this time around. Come on. Kath pulled out a notebook. My turn. It was always hard to get Nick to give up his notebook. The first night they'd worked on their extracurricular story, Nick had shown up with the 3 pages. Nick had shown up with 3 pages already written. That's cheating, Cass said. It's just the first push, he said, to get us rolling. She'd taken the notebook and written over and between his words, squeezing new dialogue into margins and crossing out lines that went too far. Sometimes Nick stretched his style too thin. Then she added a few paragraphs of her own. It had gotten easier to write on paper, though Kath still missed her keyboard. I need to cut and paste, she'd say to Nick. Next time you say, bring scissors. Sorry, I desperately need a sip of coffee here. They sat next to each other now when they worked, better to read and write during the others' turns. Kath had learned to sit on Nick's right side so their writing hands wouldn't bump unintentionally. It made Kath feel part like a two-headed monster, a three-legged race. It made her feel at home. She wasn't sure what Nick was feeling. They talked a lot before class and during class. Nick would crank around his chair completely. Sometimes after they got out, Kath would pretend she had to walk past Bessie Hall, where Nick's next class was, even though there was nothing past Bessie Hall but the football stadium. Thank God Mick never asked where she was going. He never asked that when they left the library at night either. They always stopped for a minute on the steps while Nick put his backpack on and wound his blue paisley scarf around his neck. Then he'd say, "See you in class," and be gone. If Kath knew Levi was in her room, she'd call and wait for him to come get her. But most nights she pressed 911 on her phone, then ran back to her dorm with her finger over the call button. Ren was on some weird diet. It's the skinny bitch diet, Courtney said. It's vegan, Ren clarified. It was Fajita Friday at Selick. Ren had a full plate of grilled green peppers and onions and 2 oranges. She'd been eating like this for a few weeks. Kath looked over her so carefully. Ren was wearing clothes that Kath had worn too, so Kath knew how they. Yeah. So Kath knew how they usually fit. Ren's sweater was still tight over her chest. Her jeans still rode too low over her ass. She and Ren were both bottom heavy. Kath liked to wear shirts and sweaters that she could pull down over her hips. Ren liked to wear things she could pull in at the waist. You look you look the same, Cass said. You look like me and look like what I'm eating. Kath was eating beef fajitas with sour cream and three kinds of cheese. Yeah, but you're not drinking. Is this part of the skinny bitch diet? We're skinny bitches on weekdays, Courtney said, and drunk bitches on the weekend. Kath tried to catch Ren's eye. I don't think I'd want to aspire to be any kind of bitch. Too late, Ren said lightly, then changed the subject. Did you hang out with Nick last night? Yeah, Kath said, and smiled. She tried to turn it into a smirk, but that just made her nose twitch like a rabbit's. Oh, Kath, Courtney said. We were thinking we could just happen to come to the library some night so we could see him. Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? No, no way, no, no, no. Kath looked at Ren. No, okay? Say okay. Okay. Ren, Ren stabbed her fork full of onions. What's the big deal? It's not a big deal, Cass said. But if you came, it would seem like a big deal. You would destroy my, hey, whatever you want to hang out, that's cool strategy. You have a strategy? Ren asked. Does it involve kissing him? Uh, does it involve kissing him? Ren wouldn't leave the kissing thing alone. Ever since Abel dumped Kath, Ren was on her about chasing her passions and letting loose the beast within. What about him? She'd say, finding an attractive guy to point out while they were standing in the lunch line. Do you want to kiss him? I don't want to kiss some stranger, Kath would answer. I'm not interested in lips out of context. It was only partly true. Ever since Abel had broken up with her, ever since Nick had started sitting next to her, Kath kept noticing things. Boys. Guys. Everywhere. Seriously, everywhere. In her class, in the union, in the dormitory, on the floors above her and below her. She'd swear they didn't look anything like the boys in high school. How can that one how can that one year make such a difference? Kath found herself watching their necks and their hands. She noticed the heaviness in her jaw, or in their jaws, the way their chests busted out from their shoulders, their hair. Nick's eyebrows trailed into his hairline, and his sideburns feigned into his cheeks. When she sat behind him in class, she could see muscles in his left shoulder sliding under his shirt. Even Levi was a distraction, a near constant distraction, with his long tan neck, his throat bobbing and chording when he laughed. Kath, Kath felt different, tuned in, boy even though none of these guys seemed like boys. Crazy, and for once, Ren was just the last person she wanted to talk to it about. Everyone was the last person Kath wanted to talk to her about. My strategy, she said to Ren now, is to make sure he doesn't meet my prettier, skinnier twin. I don't think it would matter, Ren said. Kath noticed she wasn't arguing the prettier, skinnier point. It sounds like he's into your brain. I don't have into your brain. She didn't, and Kath didn't understand that at all. They had the same DNA, the same nature, the same nurture. All the differences between them didn't make sense. Come come home with me this weekend, Kath said abruptly. She found a ride back to Omaha. Ren had already said she didn't want to go. You know Dad misses us, Kath said. Come on. Ren looked down at her tray. I told you, I've got to study. There's a home game this weekend, Courtney said. We don't have to be sober until Monday at 11. Have you even called Dad? Kath asked. We've been emailing, Ren said. He seems fine. He misses us. He's supposed to miss us. He's our father. Yeah, Kath said softly, but he's different. Wren's face lifted, and she glared at Kath, shaking her head just slightly. Kath pushed away from the table. I better go. I need to run back to my room before class. When Professor Piper asked for their unreliable narrator papers that afternoon, Wren grabbed Kath out of her hand. She grabbed it. Nick grabbed Kath out of her hand. She grabbed it back. He raised an eyebrow. Kath tilted her chin and smiled at him. It was only later that she realized that she was giving him one of Wren's smiles, one of her evangelical smiles. Nick pushed his tongue into his cheek and studied Kath for a second before he turned around. Professor Piper took the paper from her hand. Thank you, Kath. She smiled warmly and squeezed Kath's shoulders. I can hardly wait. Nick twisted his head and Nick twisted his head back around. Bleh. Nick twisted his head back around at that. Pet, he mouthed. Kath thought about reaching up to the back of his head and petting his hair down to the point. Boy, I can't focus for some reason. Kath thought about reaching up to the back of his head and petting his hair down to the point at his neck. It had been 2 hours since they watched the drawbridge lock into the fortress. 2 hours of squabbling about whose fault it had been. Baz would pout and say, "We wouldn't have missed curfew if you hadn't gotten in my way." And Simon would growl and say, "I wouldn't have to get in your way if you weren't wandering the grounds nefariously." But the truth, Simon knew, was that he had just gotten caught up in their arguing so that they'd lose track of time, and now they have to spend the night out here. There was no getting around the curfew, no matter how many times Baz clicked his heels and said, "There's no place like home." That was the 7th-year spell, anyway. There was no way Baz could pull it off. Simon sighed and dropped down onto the grass. Baz was still muttering and staring up at the fortress like he might yet miss a spot. Simon sighed and dropped down onto the grass. Baz was still muttering and staring up at the fortress like he might yet spot a way in. "Boy," Simon said, thumping Baz's knee. "Ow, what?" "I've got an arrow bar," Simon said. "Want half?" Baz peered down, his long face as gray as his eyes in the gloaming. He flicked his black hair back and forward, settling down next to Simon on the hill. "What kind?" "Mint." Simon dug the candy out from the pocket in his cape. "That's my favorite," Baz admitted grudgingly. Simon flashed him a wide, white grin. "Mine too." From Secrets, Stars, and Arrow Bars, posted January 2009 by fanfics.net authors Magicath and Renegade. Okay. Whew, my body is not cooperating with me right now, so I'm going to take a break. I'm going to actually not pause. I'm going to end this recording now. So I guess the what's it called? The precedent seems to be 2 chapters at a time. So that is how we're going to do that for the time being. I was hoping to do more like 3 or 4 chapters at a time, but yeah, my throat is not cooperating with me. Like feels like there's something like deep in my nose, and I'm gonna go try doing something to see if I can clear that out. Maybe I need a break, even though it's not much of a recording, but this is probably the most talking I've done in a very long time, so maybe that has something to do with it as well. So anyway, I hope you're enjoying this so far, and I will be back. I will definitely try to get through a majority of this today. So, all right, I will see you later.